Democratic Senator from North Dakota, Byron Dorgan, CNBC contributor and former Bush White House political director Sarah Fagan, and deputy editor of the Rothenberg Political Report and contributing writer for Roll Call, Nathan Gonzales. Welcome all. Senator, let me start with you. It is, frankly, and I'm sure Sarah remembers this during the Bush years, this always comes up when the country is put on a terror footing for a few days or a week, and then nothing happens, then we have this debate. Is it a relevant debate, or are we now over-debating this point?
No, I think it's pretty much a thoughtless debate in the sense that put yourself in the Oval Office and have intelligence officials come to you with threats that you think and they think are credible threats. What do? My hope is that a president will always exercise caution on behalf of this country in the face of those so-called credible threats. So it doesn't matter what action a president would take. The president these days in this political system is always going to be criticized. I think the president's willing to take some criticism for his action here based on what he thought was the right thing for the country, based on the threat.
Sarah, you guys dealt with this criticism as well when back during the color alert levels, and then there'd be a big pronouncement, and then nothing would happen, and everybody'd say, what's going on?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, you are sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. I think the challenge for the president, though, is that he's been pretty inconsistent as it relates to his foreign policy. You know, didn't react to intelligence in Benghazi, now perhaps overreacts to the intelligence that came out about a week ago. You know, gets involved in Egypt and helps get rid of Mubarak, does nothing now, gets involved, you know, in with Russia and moves Czech Republic and the Polish missile defense system out. You know, our friends in the United States and the world look at us and say, we're not standing with them. Our enemies don't sufficiently fear us.
Well, I want to tackle that subject in a second, but Nathan, go to the Ted Koppel criticism.
Well, I think that with you know, when you focus this through the lens of domestic politics, that because the threat level increased happened overseas. I mean, we're talking about embassies being.
It wasn't here in the United States.
Right. I think you know there are those people that are going to criticize the president no matter what he does, but because there was a level of distance and it wasn't people standing in line at airports for 4 hours or something. You know, I think that there is little downside to the domestic policy or political front for the
But let's go. Senator, I'm curious if you want to respond to Sarah's criticism there a little bit of the administration. And look, the fact of the matter is it's been a rough 6 months for the president on foreign policy.
Sarah's criticism was pretty broad-brushed. I mean, look.
But let's talk about this. I would say this issue, particularly of Egypt, and you look at the Snowden thing, you know, it's been a rough 6 months for the president on foreign policy.
It's been a rough 6 months for the country in many ways. I mean, the president didn't bring on the Snowden issue. I mean, you know, look, when you take a look at the Arab Spring, take a look at what's going on in Egypt, it's very easy to be critical of this administration, but in my judgment, that criticism is often unwarranted. You try to work through these things as best you can. You know, the Egyptian situation is really very interesting and very complicated in my judgment. And my own view of the president is he's taken on some pretty tough situations, and I think he's done a pretty solid job. And
he's misplayed.
On Egypt, though, but let's go to Egypt a minute. Let's because what is the alternative? Do you not stand up for democratic values?
Well, the challenge that you have with the president is you go in and remove Mubarak, and now you tie aid to a democratic process. The Egyptians remove Morsi, and the United.
Do you think we should pull aid?
Well.
I mean, you know, there was some talk of that, but even McCain and Lindsey Graham are saying, don't do that yet.
Here's the challenge is that he misplays his hand, and he goes out and says these statements. You know, take Syria, for example. We're going to draw a red line on chemical weapons, yet they use chemical weapons, and I agree. This is complicated. Well, what are you going to do, invade? But the problem is the way he handles it on the front end, not on the back end.
But let's look at Syria. I mean, what would one have the president do in Syria? Send American troops to Syria? I listened to all this criticism and try to think through what would the critics do were they in the president's chair trying to represent the best interests of this country? So
no, but what he would have done is been stronger with the Russians earlier and stronger with the Chinese earlier, and used diplomatic relations to have Russia play a more appropriate role as opposed to sending warships to defend them.
You know what I find fascinating about this, and I say this not left, right, not you two specifically, Nathan, is we wonder why there's an isolationist streak running right now in both parties, where suddenly you have this sense of, you know what, this stuff is very hard, and no matter what, they're going to hate us. And no matter what, maybe we should withdraw.
I think because of the past wars, I mean, in the past deployments, there is a reluctance on both sides to get involved. And I think that that's a new part of our politics that's changed since 10 years ago.
But we are involved very aggressively diplomatically. The diplomacy piece is very important. You don't always see it.
True.
You don't always recognize it. But I'm telling you, it goes on, and this administration has done quite well with it.
Right, we're going to talk more raw politics with you guys later in the show. Coming up, a look at who the Democrats need to win over to keep control in the Senate, and who's really at risk of losing their Senate seats, turning into a small battlefield, but a fascinating one. But first, the power behind the throne, a new look at the matriarch of the Kennedy family and the roles she played for generations of politicians in her family, perhaps their best-known media consultant. You're watching the Daily Rundown only on MSNBC.